All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our third SAT study program. It's me, Hasith, as usual. And today we are going to continue not where we left off. Actually, in order to give us a little bit of a break with topic fatigue, we're going to do a little bit something different today. And we are going to get started on writing. So what's going to happen is we did math the previous two sessions, and then this session we'll do writing, and then the next two sessions should still be math, and then the two sessions after that will be writing. So yeah, just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a break, and also I need to give myself a little bit of break with math because I love math, but you can only do so much, right? Anyway, let's get this started now. And before we actually get into learning stuff, we're going to start with a little bit of a thought exercise. So I want you to read this passage, the entire passage right here, and then try answering the questions that you see on the right. Try doing it yourself, and we're not going to answer the questions necessarily when we're done, but we're going to go over them and think about them. Yes, Mahit, you have a question?
Do you have any resources? Because I missed the last session. Do you have any resources that you
um,
could probably email?
yeah, probably. I'm pretty sure that a recording might be going out sometime on the YouTube channel. I'll let you know.
Wait, the recording is for this YouTube channel, so we can have access to it then.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the first session was posted, so I assume the second session might be posted. Oh yeah, also I'll mention that I'll give you guys 5 minutes to do this since, well, it's a decent bit to read and you should probably take a little bit of time to check out the questions. All right then, everybody. So 5 minutes aren't necessarily up, but I feel like that's enough time for now. So we'll come back and discuss these problems. Yes, discuss these. For some of them, when I ask, it would be nice if you could put your thoughts in the chat. With the first question, for example. So the number two, by the way, if you didn't notice, it corresponds to the number two in the passage. So for example, number two, do you think swear is the best word to use here? Well, what is this sentence? These models have expanded researchers' knowledge of ancient species and swear to advance the field of paleontology. So, what do you think? Put in the chat. What words would you use instead of swear? Or, or tell me if you think that swear is a good idea. I'm seeing a lot of good options. Promise and hope are very popular, are likely. That's a good one. It's specific and it's good. Propose, maybe. Propose is a little bit different in this context, but it can work. Help is also a great one. Guaranteed, that could also work. It's a little bit strong, but that works. Yeah, these are all great options. Wow, it's good that so many of you came up with great words. Yeah, but as I'm glad most of you can tell, swear is not the best word to use here. Now, why is that? Well, I mean, given that most of you have probably are probably in America and have been born speaking English, it's kind of like an intuition thing, right? You can just kind of feel like swear is not the right word to use, and that other words are better. So the big thing about the writing section, I'll say, is that you can get far, or at least a good amount of distance, just by using your intuition. Because a lot of writing depends on sort of your gut feeling. Like, this feels wrong. Would I really say it like this? This feels unnecessary. Those thoughts should be going through your head all the time when you're doing the writing section. Now, number three, this one's about use. So, do you think that the underlined passage is helpful? So, the underlined passage. So, let me see if you don't have polls, but that's all right. Let me know in the chat. Do you think that this passage we should keep it or we should get rid of it? Oh, wow. This is pretty split. I'm getting a good amount of no's, but I'm also getting a good amount of keeps. It seems to be leading to no, but there's still a good amount of yeses in this case. So why should we keep this or why shouldn't we keep it? So what is the underlined portion talking about? So it's talking about how 3D printers work. Now, do we need to know how 3D printers work? Is it useful? So the thing is that it's not just about if it's useful, it's also important for context. So here's a good answer from RLG that I see. It is a comparison that is unnecessary. And that another one was that it is relevant, or sorry, it is useful but not necessary to the passage. Actually, it kind of is. Now, this is one part where if you read closely, you'll see why it's necessary. So first of all, the information, we should say, is relevant to the passage because they're talking about 3D printers, right? What if the person reading it doesn't know what a 3D printer is? It could be helpful to know what that is, right? And also, if you see the sentence after the underlined part, it starts with the plastic hardens quickly. So when you say something like that, you're implying that you were talking about plastic in the previous sentence. Imagine if we cut out the underlined portion. What is the sentence before the underlined portion? A 3D printer then builds a polymer model based on this blueprint, much as a regular computer printer reproduces digital documents on paper. The plastic hardens quickly. There's a problem because you never mentioned plastic before the underlined portion happened, and the plastic is only mentioned in the underlined portion. So we kind of need the, that sentence around there. Also, seems like there's some spamming. By the way, my policy on spamming is if spamming continues, I will close the chat. So don't do that. So yeah, it's not just about your gut feeling. Sometimes it's also about the logical flow of the passage. Now, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, most of these are grammar related ones. So, number 7 is a good one, in my opinion. This is a more thoughtful question. By the way, all these questions, we're going to take a deeper look at them later on. So, number 7, this one might have been a little bit difficult to understand how you're supposed to go about it, but sentence number 2 is kind of in a weird spot. And we need to figure out maybe there's a better place we could put it, right? So if you notice, the sentences are numbered, and we can see if we can put it in front of any other sentences. Now, let me know in the chat, what sentence numbers do you think we should put this in front of? So we're getting a good amount of 1s, some 3s, some 4s. Seems like we're getting a bunch of different answers. 5. That I didn't see that one a lot until now. Yeah, and 6 doesn't exist, so that's not even a real answer. Now, let's think about this. Sentence number 2. The sentence states, but now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. A team led by Drexel University professor, Sentence 2, yeah, that was sentence 2, what I just said before. We were just going to sentence 3 a little bit. So sentence 2, a big thing that you should see about the sentence is that it starts with the word but, which means that before that, there had to have been some kind of contradiction, because you would never say but if you were not contradicted at all. So what sentences can be contradictory? What sentences would there be an issue, perhaps? And then sentence 2 is coming to the rescue saying, but now we have this. Well, sentence 1 is saying a significant benefit of 3D printing technology, yada, yada, yada. Well, that's describing 3D printing, but it's not saying anything specific. Number three is just describing a team of people leading, a team in making models of dinosaurs. Number four, in the past, such research was limited by the weight and bulk of the fossils as well as its preciousness and fragility. So sentence four is talking about a problem, right? Where it was tough for researchers to put bones together because they were heavy and they were delicate and breakable. So sentence two says 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a solution to number four. So sentence two actually should go after sentence four because it provides a great transition. And also, it leads well into sentence five by saying, in many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist renderings, which is talking about uses of said 3D scale models. The question was just only talking about in front of, but it's also important to see how the sentence leads into the next one so you can make sure that your answer is correct. So let's move on. And also just letting you know, I will temporarily disable chat when we don't need it to prevent spamming. So let's talk about the actual writing section. Now, if you remember the writing section, there are 44 questions and you have 35 minutes. So that's around 47 seconds a question, which seems short, but it's not going to be that bad because most of the questions are grammar based and you're going to be able to answer them very quickly. Yes, Yuthi, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so for the previous question, I think it was question 3 in the previous slide.
Yeah.
And it's like, what sentence would you keep or delete the sentence? What was your answer to that? I would say to keep it, but what do you think the correct answer would be?
Yeah, well, honestly, this is kind of a controversial question. Overall, I would say that you should keep this question because 3D printing information is relevant. Your reader might not know what 3D printing is. And also, it's the only sentence portion that talks about hardened plastic or melted polymer plastic. And the following sentence after that talks about plastic hardening. So it needs the introduction of plastic somewhere. And that underlined portion provides that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
No worries. So like I was saying before, you're not going to have a lot of time on each per question, but that shouldn't be a major problem. Now, there are two main types of writing questions. There are expression of idea questions, where you're not necessarily fixing the grammar, but you'll be fixing, let's say, the vocabulary of a passage, or you will be changing the phrases of a passage so that you can make it sound better or get a message across easier. And then standard English convention questions, that is just your general grammar fixation questions. They're pretty simple, but they can also be kind of tough because remember how I said in writing, you get by a lot on your intuition? This is kind of where a lot of that crumbles because you would be shocked at how many students don't know the reasoning behind why certain punctuation marks are placed where they are. For example, I have run into many people who don't know what the difference between a colon and a semicolon is. Yes, there is a difference. There is a major difference. We will talk about that much later. And if you already do know the difference, good. You're kind of ahead. Let's get on to our first topic of discussion, modifier placement. So in a sentence, there might be things called modifiers, and these are phrases or words that describe a noun, such as the bird was hearing things, or it could be such like trying to think of a good one. It could be like a series, or it could be like a long phrase, such as the color was sorry. Let's say if we were talking about like a red velvet cake, even under the heat of 400 degrees, the cake still maintained a color of red. So the modifier would be even under 400 degrees, because we are making modification, or we're talking about a noun, which is the red velvet cake. Now, here's the thing. The noun must immediately come after the modifier so that there's no confusion. You don't want there to be any confusion at all. In this question, for example, just some context, in this paragraph, in this passage, they're talking about a famous artist who made an abstract statue and how a court was trying to rule to see if this abstract statue was really a piece of art or should be considered a piece of art. So in the sentence, it goes, after hearing a lineup of famous art critics testify to the aesthetic value and originality of non-representational art like Bird in Space, that is the name of said art piece, the court's ruling was in favor of Brancusi. Brancusi is the artist in question. Now, this sentence might sound all right to most of you, but it's actually wrong because the modifier placement is not necessarily proper. What do I mean? Well, excuse me, came down with a kind of a meh cough today. So what is the modifier? After hearing a lineup of famous art critics testify, this is our modifier because this is what our noun is supposed to be doing in this sentence. Now, what is our noun? Well, our noun, let me move my station a bit. Okay, yeah. Our noun in this case would be the court's ruling. Now, I have a question. After hearing a lineup of famous art critics testify to, this phrase can be done by a human, right? Because humans are the ones who can hear things, and well, they can hear, well, human things like testifications, right? Now, the court is hearing these things. However, the noun in this case is the court's ruling. The court's ruling is a different noun than just the court. The court is the people, but then the court's ruling is the decision. The decision is an intangible thing, an object. A ruling cannot hear things. So option A, no change, is actually wrong. We need to change this so that the noun is just the court. So B, the ruling of the court. Well, like we just said, a ruling cannot hear something, so B is wrong. C, the court ruled in favor of Brancusi. Yes, this is a good one. Now, you might be saying, oh, well, this is very similar to 32 because it's just a difference in like tense, right? Because this one says ruling and this one says ruled. Well, there is a big difference because ruling is a noun and ruled is a past tense verb. So that means that the court is just a noun by itself, and that C is the correct answer. Option D, where Brancusi is the main noun, well, that doesn't make any sense because why would the defendant be listening, or why would the defendant be hearing these art critics testify about the work? He's not the one who is the jury. Seems like we have two questions, Sanvi and Mahit. I'll ask Sanvi to speak first. Seems like we cannot hear you. Unfortunately, yeah, now we can hear you. Okay, well, if there's no question, we'll have to move on. Mahit, do you have a question?
Hi.
Yeah, hello.
Because the thing is, here court is the noun. So here when we're saying the ruling of the court, why wouldn't, just think of it. Court is a noun here. And here I know A is wrong only because courts, C-R-T apostrophe S is not the noun. Court is the noun. So why would it not be B versus C? Because it still says court. The ruling is being done by the court. So the ruling is being done by the court. So B should be the correct answer, if I am right.
Well, the thing is, it's not the correct answer because we need to think logically about modifiers' relation to the noun because the noun has to be something that can perform the modifier. The modifier in this case is a verb that can only be done by a human, which is after hearing a lineup, that is something done by a human or a group of humans. And the court works in this case as the proper noun because that is a group of humans. B is incorrect because the ruling of the court, that is a noun, that is an intangible object. The ruling is the noun, and a ruling cannot hear something.
Oh, okay. I was like, to me, it was like here, the ruling is like what's happening. The thing is, the judge is the one who's making the ruling. So it's like, I thought the ruling was referring to the judge.
Oh, no.
It was the court that was in favor of Brancusi. That was what I was thinking first.
Yeah. In writing, you shouldn't be accounting for outside information too much. I only gave you a little bit of context here, but for example, like what I mean is in a question, if you know something outside, like you're doing a research passage and you know a little bit extra information about the topic at hand, and the information can help you, you're actually not supposed to use the information because you're only supposed to rely on information from the passage. And doing that can actually get questions wrong because a lot of questions are evidence-based. And in this case, for modifiers, always need to think, can the noun perform the modifier? So we will move on to some practice. So here is some practice. I will give you guys 2 minutes to do this starting now. All right, everybody, 2 minutes are up. So let's come back and check out these questions. So the first sentence, happy that the long winter was over, John's coats were placed in the closet in the basement. So what is the modifier here? What is being performed by the noun? Well, happy is the noun. The noun is being happy, happy that the long winter was over. Now, what is the noun in the first sentence? John's coats. Now, tell me, in this relationship between the modifier and the noun, can coats be happy? Well, coats are not sentient objects or sentient beings, and they cannot process emotion, so they cannot be happy. So A is wrong. It's kind of obvious in the sentence that we're supposed to be talking about John, and John's just putting his coats in the closet, but the noun there should be John himself. What about B? Happy that the long winter was over, John's coats were placed in the closet in the basement. This is just a worse answer even than A because it's sort of the same thing, but there's no comma even. Commas are important because of the pause and also dependent clause, independent clause. We'll get into that way later. C, happy that the long winter was over, John's closet had his coats placed in it in the basement. Wow, that was some real backflipping that I had to do to make a sentence that complicated and unnecessary. I would never in my life would write a sentence like this. This is an abomination. And also, John's closet cannot be happy, so C is wrong. That leaves us with a D, which is automatically the correct answer. And if we look at it, happy that the long winter's over, John placed his coats. So in this case, John is the first noun that is after the modifier, and that means it properly connects. Now, second question, having difficulty swallowing, vitamin C are a supplement children don't usually take. Now, vitamin C is not the thing that is having difficulty swallowing. Children are the, people who are having difficulty swallowing. So we need to make it so that children is the main noun being affected by the modifier. So A is obviously wrong. Now, B is changing the modifier a little bit. Because they have difficulty swallowing, children don't usually take vitamin C supplements. So we're talking about a difficulty where this noun has trouble swallowing, and then immediately we're referring to children. That is correct. Children can perform or be affected by said modifier. So that means B is the correct answer. C is wrong because the vitamin C and then supplements cannot swallow, so that makes no sense. And then D also doesn't make any sense because it just goes back to vitamin C. Mahit, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question about B. It says because they have difficulty swallowing. What is they in this sentence supposed to refer to? Because if you're saying that the swallowing is referring to the children, wouldn't they be the children?
They is referring to the children because, if you read the sentence, it's obviously referring to the children. Modifiers in this case usually use pronouns, and then the actual noun itself is referred to later.
Yeah, I have wouldn't the
Vilas, you have a question?
Yeah. Don't we usually not start a sentence with because?
That is a usual case by teachers, I assume. Grammatically, there's nothing wrong with starting a sentence with because. I mean, there are some general rules of thumb, such as you shouldn't start a sentence with and stuff like that. But I mean, if you look at it purely grammatically, there's nothing really wrong with option B and D. We're only going over the hard, cold facts when it comes to this. And I will say though, starting a sentence with and, that is a very well-known assumption, and you should never ever start a sentence with and. That is a perfectly valid reason to be suspicious. But other words, such as, because, they should be okay to use, especially if they're used in like a slang or casual type manner, in which they kind of are. This is not professional language. We will move on to the next question. Oh, wow, I skipped ahead a little bit. Okay, setting up ideas. Number 3. So number 3 is asking which phrase most effectively sets up the examples in the second part of the sentence. So we have to look at the number 3 that is over on the top. Regrettably, electronic medical records require infrastructure that can be expensive to build. Okay, so this is the introduction of the sentence. If you make an introduction, whatever is said in the introduction should relate to the rest of the passage in some way, right? Well, what is the rest of the passage about? Let's read that. They don't require physical storage space, they don't need to be photocopied and collated, and they are less likely to be physically misplaced. More importantly, electronic health records accelerate communication between various healthcare providers, allowing for more efficient patient treatment. So, wow, this sounds like a lot of good things. It sounds like they're talking about how great electronic medical records are. So it's kind of odd that the default intro sentence is talking about a bad aspect of medical records. We need to change this intro. I don't like this current intro because it's not related at all to the contents of the passage. I mean, it's related in the fact that it's talking about electronic medical records, but we need an intro that leads into this paragraph talking about the great aspects of electronic health records. Let's go a little bit all over the place. D, typically electronic health records need a full-time staff to maintain them. Well, we're not talking about drawbacks, and D is a drawback, so D should be wrong. C, researchers have weighed the benefits and drawbacks of electronic health records. This is a neutral stance where they're not necessarily for them or against them, but we need something that's for them. So C is wrong. And B is correct because, it's for electronic health records. Electronic health records provide many advantages over paper ones. Straight and simple. And after that intro, you go into a whole cascade of why electronic health records are great. So Simple as that. The intro needs to relate to what the rest of the paragraph is talking about. It needs to do it in the right tone. And well, overall, it just needs to match the content. So here is some practice. I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes to do this starting now. All right, everybody, 3 minutes are up. So let's come back and check out these questions. So the first question, we need to choose the example or at least the best answer that sets up the information. This movement, called the Great Migration, would transform urban America and recast the social and political order of the country as a whole. In particular, Detroit, Chicago, and other Midwestern industrial cities experienced significant demographic changes. Now, you don't need to know the full context of the passage to answer this question. All you need to know is that there was a movement called the Great Migration. It transformed America and it affected the cities in question. Now, the underlined portion is leading into the second sentence, which is talking about how a lot of cities experience significant demographic changes. Now, which of the following options provides the best introduction to that? The first option is pretty good. It's all right, because, well, it's talking about the country as a whole, and then it's talking about how certain parts of the country were affected, specifically cities. So A can work. I'll just put a little symbol there for it can work, but there might be a better option. Now, what about D? The social and political order of everyday life. Everyday life. Well, if we're going to talk about everyday life, then the second sentence, we should be talking about how the Great Migration affected everyday life. But we're not talking about that. We're only talking about how it affected certain cities. So D doesn't really work. C is similar to D in that it's talking about how people interacted socially. That is not what we're talking about in the second sentence. So C is not a good lead-in or introduction to the second sentence. B, the social and political order of every city it touched. So we're talking about cities now. We're leading into cities. And the second sentence, we're talking about how specific cities were affected and changed demographically. So B is sort of like a more specific version of A, and it's actually a better version of A because specificity, God, I hope I said that right, is usually better than a general statement in writing. So B is going to be the correct answer. Now, the second question. A tip I like to do is try to imagine the sentence without the underlined portion and then just read the sentence like that and then try to figure it out. So in this case, let's try and do that. Andy Warhol explained that the soup had personal significance to him as a consumer because I used to drink it. Now, what sentence would have the best introduction to this? Well, sentence. Sorry, phrase. What phrase will have the best introduction? So option A, born in Pittsburgh in 1928. Okay, that's a fact about Andy Warhol. How is that related to soup? It's not really related to soup. I mean, it's kind of useful information. I guess it's okay, but there might be better options. B, a leading figure in the American pop art movement. Andy Warhol explained, etc. Okay, well, this option B is a really specific piece of information about his art, and art is not really relevant at all in this sentence, so it's worse than A, so I'd say that B is wrong. C, when asked why he chose to paint cans of Campbell's soup, now this is a good intro because, well, we're talking about soup in the sentence, so C is a question, or at least just talking about when he was asked a question about him painting cans of soup. So C is a way better option than A, and C is going to be the correct answer. D is going to just be wrong because, well, it's just a general statement about Andy Warhol that doesn't relate to the sentence at all. Sai, you have a question?
Yeah. So in the first question, I understand why it's B, but it feels kind of redundant to me. Because we have other Midwestern industrial cities, and then we have the social and political order of every city it touched. I don't know, but like it feels kind of redundant to me. Like they keep saying
I didn't notice that until now, and you are correct. It can feel a little bit redundant, but in this case, redundancy is strongest when the same words are in the same sentence. And in this case, they're in different sentences. So it should be all right in a general sense. It might be a little bit redundant, but it is the most specific answer and it concerns cities. So B will still be the correct option. Sometimes answers will never ever be 100% the best option. You might think in your head, I could have written something better, but it's not sometimes not about that. Sometimes you have to pick the least worst option. You might think, oh, all these answers kind of suck. Well, you're gonna have to pick the option that sucks the least.
Okay, thank you.
Samruti, you have a question? This will be the last question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, so this is kind of like an overall question. It kind of relates to this one too, though. So how often is no change going to be the right answer? Like, can we safely assume that it's like rarely going to be the right answer? Because I know for like some questions, like if it says like all of the above, like never pick all of the above.
Are you assuming that like A in this case is kind of like option E? Why would you ever pick option E?
Yeah.
Okay, option A is definitely a viable answer. It has just as much of a chance as B, C, and D at popping up. Don't think of it as no change. Just imagine that the underlined portion was gone and replaced with whatever is the underlined portion. It is absolutely a valid answer, and it will appear a lot as the answer on the SAT. Okay, in this case, we'll move on. I'm going to do a maximum of 2 questions per slide because of time constraints. Okay, strong support. So, which choice gives a second reason and additional support for the main idea of the paragraph? So, well, okay, I guess we need to read the paragraph. Excuse me. So, just saying, if you read this little bit over here, gives a little bit more context. We're talking about Michelangelo, the artist, and one of the statues, and how he gave it to the city so that they could, well, display it. In the paragraph, it goes, upon viewing the stunning statue, guild members discarded the plan to hoist the statue to an exterior buttress. It was far too beautiful. We're going to ignore the underlined part for now. It was far too beautiful to be placed high above its viewers. After meeting with city officials and prominent citizens, the members agreed that the statue should instead stand outside of Florence's town hall. Okay, so in number 31, they're asking us for additional support. That means we need to think about additional reasons for why the guild members discarded the idea to put the statue high up on a buttress. So this is kind of like a logic problem or a common sense problem. You also have to choose an answer that logically relates to the paragraph. And also, well, in the first place, you need to figure out the main idea of the paragraph. The main idea of the paragraph is clearly talking about how the guild members changed their mind on putting the statue in a high up place. So 31. The statue was unlike other Renaissance depictions of David. David, in this case, is the man that Michelangelo made a statue of. Okay, so all the options here, by the way, are true, but we need to pick the one that works in this case. So number 31, how does option A make it so that you should not put the statue high up? So because it is an unusual statue, you should not put it high up. Some people might argue that if it's unique, then you should put it high up. So that doesn't really make much sense. What about B? It depicts a favorite biblical story of the citizens of Florence. Okay, that makes even less sense because if it depicts the citizens of Florence, in the city of Florence, then don't you want it to be high up there maybe? Or better yet, it's not really a reason for you to keep it down here. C, it would become a symbol of Florence defense. That is not necessarily a reason to bring something down, so that doesn't make sense. D is kind of like ironic. It's really simple. So if we put it into the sentence goes, it was far too beautiful and at more than 8 tons, far too heavy. Yeah, that's your answer. D. It's just a simple, reasonable explanation for why they chose to not put the statue in a high up place. Yes, Sid, you have a question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
For the other ones, I thought that they didn't put it up at the top because they really liked it, and the other ones were praising it. Like,
Oh, so the thing is that you can't make your own conclusions like that. You can't think that, oh, the citizens really liked it and that's why they didn't put up there. Right here, we're trying to figure out the conclusion. So if you make that preconception in your head that this is already the conclusion and I need to find answers to support it, then you're gonna unfortunately skip past answers that make more logical sense. Remember, the paragraph is purely, the main idea of the paragraph is why the guild members didn't want to put the statue in a high up place. And well, if you can kind of notice, this paragraph is using formal language and it's also using kind of fantastical language. And the gimmick that they're doing here is they start the sentence off with, it was far too beautiful, in sort of a humorous way. And then the parentheses, they say, and at more than 8 times it was far too heavy. So they're introducing it with like a sort of aloof reason, and then later on, or at least like immediately after that, they're giving the serious reason for sort of like comedic contrast. So D in this case makes more sense because it provides that tonal contrast that makes the sentence work, and also it is the most logical answer because it's 8 tons. You can't put that in a high up place.
okay, thank you.
No problem. Oh wait, sorry, I accidentally sent an ask to unmute request. My bad. All right, let's move on. Okay, now here is some practice. I'm gonna give you guys 2 minutes to do this starting now. All right then, everybody, 2 minutes are up. So let's come back and check out these questions. So, no, let me just, okay. So once again, we need to choose the proper support for these sentences. So the first question, we tend to think of invertebrates as little things, like garden slugs, but this is misguided as if we formed our view of vertebrates based only on what? The next sentence is talking about the largest invertebrate on Earth, the giant squid, which can grow to 60 feet. So what kind of support should we look for? Clearly, the author, she is saying how normally we think that invertebrates are small things and that this is wrong because they can be really big. So she's saying that in order to support this best, we need to find an example that matches her comparison, or at least the intent of her comparison when it comes to like vertebrates. In this case, that should be a small versus big thing because we need to compare it like that. So B, on cats without ever considering dogs. So cats and dogs are a societal opposite, but they don't really make sense. I mean, one's not necessarily way bigger than the other. I mean, at least when you consider like a slug to a giant squid. So B doesn't really make sense. Oh yeah, also A, fish without ever considering birds. Well, what's the difference between fish and birds? I guess is that one swims while the other flies, but how is that related to the support we want, which is small versus big? It's not. So A is wrong. C, on mice without ever considering elephants. This is a good answer because it's a proper support that mocks us for like forming our view based on tiny mice without ever considering massive vertebrates like elephants. C is a good answer. D, on humans without ever considering other animals. This doesn't really make much sense because, well, just humans to other animals. I mean, what are they trying to do with that comparison? That's not even really, that makes absolutely no sense. You could maybe say, oh, well, they're trying to compare like intelligence, but that doesn't even work in this case, even if they were trying to do that. So D is wrong and C is correct. Now, the next question. Dali was mainly a painter, but he made frequent forays into other artistic mediums and he enjoyed collaborating with other artists. So that's like our main sentence. We need to provide support for this sentence. Now, what is the main idea of the sentence? The main idea of the sentence is that he's mainly a painter, but he likes checking out other art mediums and he likes collaborating with people. Which sentence best supports this? A is a really good option. This is good because it talks about how Dali designed a dream sequence. So designing a dream sequence, I assume this is sort of like script writing, or it could be media art. And this is a artistic medium different from painting. So it supports the idea that he likes checking out other artistic mediums outside of painting. And it also shows that he collaborates because it mentions that he was doing this for the Hollywood director, Alfred Hitchcock. So A is a really good option. What about B? Many of the bizarre images Dali painted, like the melting clocks, remain cultural icons today. Okay, it's talking about his painting and how it was very influential, but is that really something that supports what was said in the previous sentence? Not talking about his artistic adventures outside of painting and collaborations. It's not. B is not really a good answer. C, but it was Dali's dramatic flair and style as much as his artwork that made him so well known and has kept him so well remembered. So this is just talking about his personality and the way he does things. Once again, that doesn't support anything in the previous sentence, so that's unfortunate. D, many popular modern artists, including Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst, pointed Dali as a central influence on their work. So this answer talks about people which we could use as support, but it doesn't even really work in this case because these people were inspired by Dali and Dali never collaborated with them, which is the evidence that we want. So D is going to be wrong. A is the correct answer. We will move on now. Okay, relevant information. Apologies for the blurry image. So relevant information questions are when the question will ask you, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. They put the sentence there, and then you need to pick the option that you think is correct. The options are going to be saying either yes or no for whether or not you should put the sentence in, and then they're going to go deeper into why you selected that option. Okay, you can't just luck it out by guessing yes or no. You also have to choose the option with the right reasoning. And sometimes the reasoning is more important than your preconceived notion. So he's planning to add the sentence at where number 23 is marked in the passage. So in order to properly answer this question, it is best suggested that you read the surrounding sentences for context. So first sentence, all my life, the sculptor Konstantin Brancusi remarked, I have been seeking to capture the essence of flight. Bird in Space is a work of abstract art. It is not a readily recognizable representation of the bird in its title, but rather a polished arc of bronze that calls to mind the animal's graceful airborne motion. So, should we put this sentence there? Now, before you say yes or no, you shouldn't. Why? Because unless you are really, really good at writing and you've done a lot of practice where you can do a proper intuition check, you need to read the reasoning of the answers first, because if you lock your head into thinking, yes, we should put this answer in there, and then you only look at, say, options A and B, which are the ones that say yes, then you might be skipping options C and D, which actually have very good reasoning for why you shouldn't put it there. And then you're gonna miss out on the right answer because you got clouded in your head and thought it absolutely has to be there. Whereas you could have taken advantage of the information that the options give you and got the right answer. Yeah, that's also another benefit. If you're not sure if it's yes or no, then you can read the reasoning. In fact, in general, even if you feel like you're leaning towards yes or no, just read the reasoning first. So number 23, what about option A? Yes, we should put the sentence here because it helps explain why the US government would eventually recognize bird in space as a work of art. Well, the sentence is talking about how Brancusi's sculpture achieved his goal. And is that really helping explain why they would eventually recognize his work as art? You could make some vague connections, but it's not really that strong. So I'm kind of iffy on A. So I'm not even going to put a marking. We're just going to move on to the next option because A, it doesn't seem like a good answer. We're probably going to find a better answer. B, yes, because it provides an effective transition between the presentation of Brancusi's goal and the discussion of bird in space. So B is actually a good option because it makes sense. The first sentence in the paragraph is talking about how, well, or at least is presenting his goal, which is to capture the essence of flight. And then the second sentence in the paragraph, excluding the one that we might add, is talking or at least discussing the bird of space. So B's reasoning makes sense. And I feel personally that this sentence would be a good addition because it would be the first time bird of space is mentioned. And if you look in the paragraph, if we don't put the sentence in, bird in space, I've been saying it wrong the entire time. Bird in space is being introduced just like that, as if we already know what it is. Well, we don't know what it is. The second sentence helps to introduce it a little bit and make the flow better. So B is going to be the correct answer. But let's take a look at option C and D anyways. C, no, because it presents information about bird in space that is repeated later in the paragraph. Well, it doesn't really do that. It doesn't provide any extra information that is repeated. The information in this sentence is only clarified later on. The information you could gather from the sentence is that bird in space achieved Brancusi's goal. The sentences after that specify how it achieved that goal. So there's no repetition, there's only clarification. So C is wrong. D, no, because it interrupts the explanation of the nature of abstract art. There was no explanation of the nature of abstract art in this paragraph at all, at least in the beginning around 23, so D makes no sense. So yeah, that is pretty much how relevant information works. You should look at the surrounding sentences for context and also look at the reasoning for the yeses and nos and then decide from there. So here is some practice. This might take you guys a while since you have to read a good amount, so I'll give you guys 4 minutes to do this starting now. All right, everybody, 4 minutes are up, so let's come back and check out these questions. So I'm not gonna reread the whole thing because you guys already read it. I'm just gonna go over, well, the basics. So first question is talking about the theories of how the moon was formed from the crust of the earth. And at the point labeled as number 1, they want to add the sentence, evidence to support this theory comes from the studies of rock samples recovered from the moon. So the previous sentence is, this material eventually cooled and formed the moon. Evidence to support this theory from studies of rock samples recovered from the moon. Now, remember what I just discussed with a fellow student about how it can be kind of redundant to use the same word over and over and over again? Well, that is kind of true, actually, and it wouldn't help to put more sentences like that, because if we do that, we're gonna have 3 sentences with the word moon in it, and it would be nice to have a break, or at least less than that. 2 sentences in a row with moon would be better. So I'm already leaning a little bit towards no, but let's check out the reasoning. A, we should keep it because it clarifies the connection between mineral, composition and the theory of the moon's formation. Well, it's only talking, the sentence is only talking about about how there's evidence to support the theory. It's not clarifying anything between mineral composition and moon formation. We're not like getting any extra details on the minerals in our crust that could have formed the moon. We're not getting any scientific information. We're not getting any of that. So A doesn't really make any sense to me. B, yes, because it reinforces the claim that the writer makes earlier in the paragraph. Okay, evidence to support this theory comes from studying rock samples. So how would this sentence reinforce a claim that the writer made earlier in the paragraph? What sort of claims did they make? Okay, the claims they make is this material eventually cooled and formed the moon. So the second sentence that we supposedly might add should support or reinforce this somehow. How is it doing that? I don't really feel like it's doing that at all, because it's just providing an introduction to actual evidence. And the introduction is not necessary in this case because you can just go straight into the evidence right there. Like the sentence is just going to start right there. Findings reveal that the moon is yada, yada, yada. So B is not going to make much sense to me. Now, C and D, both of the no options. C says it blurs the paragraph's focus by introducing information that isn't clearly explained. It's not really introducing any scientific information, and it's clear enough with where the evidence came from. So C is kind of iffy. What about D? It doesn't go into enough detail about the kinds of rock samples that were studied. I would say that D is an all right answer as well, because I mean, they do say that the rock samples were recovered from the moon, so it's not really exactly sure what more details you want. So I'm kind of iffy about D as well. Overall, C is the correct answer because we're introducing information that is just kind of there, and it's not really providing anything useful. I'll take one question this time, Baruch. Or okay, well, I guess you won, but Samruti.
Yeah, so I'm a little confused on why A wouldn't be the correct answer, because the way I thought about it was an effective transition from like the theory of how the moon was created into the evidence that's like why like it like kind of has an effective transition of the evidence of why the theory is correct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do understand that. It can act as a transition, but option A's logic is that it clarifies the connection, and clarification means you're providing additional information. And that sentence is not providing any additional useful information. So while your theory is technically correct to some level, option A is wrong because of the specificity of the reason. You should look at the reason.
Okay, so just like to restate that really quickly. So it would be mainly wrong because of the word clarify, because it's not really clarifying anything, right?
No, it's not giving any extra information.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
No worries. Now, the next question. We're talking about animals in the Everglades and how, there are a bunch of seeds there that are important for the ecosystem. So at that point in the sentence, the author is trying to add a sentence about revitalizing a Florida panther population. How is that going to help? Well, this paragraph overall is just about wet seasons and how, certain plants are important for the ecosystem. And overall, it's just about the relationship of the ecosystem, right? So The bolded sentence is kind of weird to place in there. I'm kind of leaning towards no again, but let's check out the options. A, because it supports the paragraph's argument with an important detail. What is the paragraph's argument? The paragraph's argument is that the annual wet seasons and dry seasons are important and that there is overall a balance and that there is an ecosystem. The bolded sentence doesn't really support anything at all. It's just a statement saying that conservation efforts revitalized some random panther population. B, yes, that was supposed to be an X. Yeah. B, yes, because it identifies the characteristics that make particular animals worthy of study. How does it identify anything special about the Florida panther that makes it worthy of study? It doesn't. B makes no sense, and it's wrong. C, it undermines the main claim of the paragraph. Well, it's not really related, but it's not saying anything wrong or it's not going against anything that's being said in the paragraph. So C is kind of iffy. It doesn't really feel right. D, no, because it's not related to the main point of the paragraph. Yeah, that's correct. D is correct. The panther population and conservation efforts, both of those topics have nothing to do with everything that is being said in this paragraph. So D is the correct option. Mahit, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was thinking like, hey, because it undermines the main claim of the paragraph, right? It's like it doesn't. How would you know which note to take? Is this C or D? That's the because the thing is, I can identify yes or no. If is it possible, I can say yes or no. But then between the two yeses, to me, I'm always confused. Which one do I have to take? And how am I gonna figure that one out? And I mean, sometimes to me, sometimes it feels like if it's too hard to spot the main claim in the passage. Sometimes here it's either at the last end of the sentence, like at the last sentence of the paragraph, or at the first sentence of the paragraph, where it's just hidden somewhere.
Yeah. Oh yeah, just a little bit of a tip. Speak a little bit slower because I can understand you, but your fellow students might not. But also, if you're confused about how I know if it's either yes or no, well, the thing is, I mean, I might have an intuition hunch, but I don't know for sure if it's yes or no. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the reasonings for the options and why they're saying yes or no, and I'm figuring out if they make sense. The options A and B, their reasons for why we should put the sentence in didn't make any sense, as I just explained. So I eliminated them. And for C, the main claim of the passage is that there is an ecosystem in the Everglades and that everything is important. And I got that. I mean, if you read the paragraph, it talks about how there are constant changing environments, how there are low periods and high periods, and how even though they hurt parts of the ecosystem, they also help parts of the ecosystem. It's overall trying to make a main idea of connection. And conservation efforts about revitalizing the Florida panther population has literally nothing to do with the paragraph, and therefore it can't hurt anything necessarily. So C is going to be wrong, and D is the best option because, well, like I just said, that bolded sentence has absolutely nothing to do with the paragraph.
Well, one more thing I have to say is that why wouldn't the answer be A here? Because, well, if it does support the paragraph with the main detail, because, well, to me, I see that the birds are eating the snails and like there's the floods and the droughts, and it's making a thing. It's kind of like
talking about,
to me, it feels like that there's an important detail in there if you add it.
Might feel important to you, but you need to look at it purely logically because we're not talking about the Florida Panthers' relationship to anything. And also the sentence is more about conservation, and we're not talking about conservation at all. So it's just unrelated topics. You can't go off making sort of haphazard assumptions to how they are connected. You need to be purely logical and look at it objectively. Okay, now here is a quiz. I'm gonna give you guys 5 minutes to do this. There are 5 questions. I believe you guys can get it done in ample time, though. All right, everybody. 5 minutes are up, so let's come back and check out these questions. So the first question, this is a modifier placement question. The modifier in this case is having returned from the ocean. So the noun in this case has to be returning from the ocean. It's kind of obvious we're talking about the salmon, right? Now, is option A a good choice? Well, option A says an adult salmon's life cycle ends when it spawns and dies. In this case, the noun is, excuse me, an adult salmon's life cycle. An adult salmon's life cycle is not the thing returning from the ocean, it is the adult salmon itself. So the noun is not correct, actually. So A is wrong. B, on the other hand, the noun in this case, or at least the first noun, is just an adult salmon spawns and dies. So this is the noun, and then this is the verb. So B is going to be the correct answer because it utilizes the correct noun. This noun can perform the action of returning from the ocean. C is wrong because the noun in this case is despawning, and then D, it has the same issue as A, where the life cycle is the noun. Now, the second question, the bottom question, where we're talking about supporting information. This paragraph is talking about a cartoonist named, well, actually, I don't know the name Nast. Nast is his name and how he used them to bring down a man named Tweed. So we need to find evidence for number 19 that supports how Nast took down Tweed. So the sentence in question is, one of the artist's most famous images showed Tweed with a bag of money in place of his head. So option A, how would that help? Like many other Nast cartoons, that one was published in Harper's Weekly. Okay, how does that support the idea that Nast was able to bring down Tweed? Well, it really doesn't, because it's just saying, oh, well, Nast cartoons were similar to others. That's not really supporting the main idea that we need. B, Nast would later illustrate Tweed's escape from prison. Well, that is talking about more illustrations he made, but it's not supporting what exactly made his cartoons so effective at taking him down. C, a depiction that omits Tweed's signature hat. This is sort of like an irrelevant piece of information. Like, okay, he doesn't have a hat. Good job. That's just, at most, C would be used for humor. So C is wrong. D is correct. An image that perfectly captured Tweed's greedy nature. This sentence best supports the idea, or at least the main idea, that Nast made cartoons that were able to get Tweed in trouble. And if you read the paragraph more, it talks about how his cartoons were important because back then a lot of the newspaper readers couldn't actually read very well. So his cartoons allowed those people to sort of see the bad things that Tweed was doing so that he could get support and take Tweed down. Siraj, you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
So for the first question, it might be a typo, but you capitalized the "and."
Yeah, that was a typo, my bad.
Okay, just in case.
Yeah. On the SAT, there's not really going to be any typos, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, next question. This is a setup question. So they're talking about philosophy in the paragraph. And they're asking us, which choice effectively sets up the information that follows? Well, what information follows? Number 37. A 1994 survey concluded that only 18% of American colleges required at least one philosophy course. Then after that, they say between 1992 and 1996, more than 400 independent philosophy departments were eliminated from institutions. Oh, yikes. Seems pretty bad for philosophy. Nobody wants to teach it, or the colleges don't even care about teaching it. That kind of sucks because philosophy is actually a good course. I took it. I highly recommend. But anyways, which choice effectively sets up this information? A. Consequently, philosophy students have been receiving an increasing number of job offers. This seems like a positive statement, but it's not going to set up the negative information that is following that. And also, A is not talking about philosophy and its relationship to colleges. It's talking about students. So A is wrong. B. Therefore, because of the evidence, colleges increase their offerings in philosophy. Oh, this is very wrong because we just talked about how colleges decrease their offerings in philosophy. C. Notwithstanding the attractiveness of this course of study, students have resisted majoring in philosophy. Now, it is kind of a negative statement, which matches with the following sentences, but we're not talking about students, which C is talking about. We're talking about colleges. So C is referring to the wrong demographic. So it doesn't make sense. D is the correct option because it is a negative statement saying that philosophy is not usually supported, and it is specific by saying that colleges have not always supported the study of philosophy. So D is the correct answer. Okay, last question. So the writer wants to add the sentence, fossils provide paleontologists with a convenient way of estimating the age of the rock in which the fossils are found. Is this related to the main paragraph at all? That's what we need to think about. The paragraph is talking about how modern technology is being used to make 3D printings and create accurate models of fossils. And the later parts of the paragraph are talking about how the models are helping a lot with advancing the field. I'm already leaning a little bit towards no because this sort of information, well, it's basic information about fossils. We're not talking about actual paleontology right now. We're talking about how paleontology is being advanced by technology. So this is sort of just a random arbitrary statement that you would just throw in there. It would kind of disrupt the flow and it doesn't really have a place there. Sure, it's related somewhat, but it's just not the best place to put it right now. So I'm already leaning a little bit towards no. But let's check out the answers anyway. Yes, because it supports the paragraph's argument with an important detail. What is the paragraph's argument? The paragraph's argument is that computers and technology is helping paleontology. How does the definition of paleontology and how fossils help paleontologists, how does that help the idea that technology is improving paleontology? It doesn't. So A is wrong. B, it provides a logical transition from the previous sentence. The previous sentence is talking about how researchers are creating accurate models of prehistoric fossils. And then it goes into how fossils provide paleontologists with a convenient way of estimating the age of the rock in which fossils are found. Now this could actually be kind of useful because the second sentence talks about how technology is helping with fossils, and then the sentence, or at least the sentence we might add, will go into more depth on how the fossils are useful. So B is actually kind of a good answer, but we might find a better answer in C and D. Because you see how that happens? Initially, we're leaning towards no, right? But then all of a sudden, you could get a really good answer in yes, because the reasoning makes a lot of sense. If you've got a little bit of stuffy nose. C, no, because it is not directly related to the main point of paragraph. Now, the main point of the paragraph, like we just said, is how technology is helping with creating accurate models of fossils. And since we're talking about fossils, well, it is kind of related because we're talking about how fossils are helpful, right? So C is kind of iffy because in a way, the new sentence would be related. D, it undermines the main claim of the paragraph. This is wrong. There's no way in that this is making any of the claims in the paragraph worse. I don't even feel like I need to explain that. Overall, B is the best answer and B is the correct answer. So yeah, That was pretty crazy, right? Initially, at least I was, maybe some of you might have, but at least initially I was leaning towards no, but then we went to yes because it had a better reasoning. Rube, you have a question?
Yeah, so my question was the little blurb fossils provide paleontologists with a convenient way of estimating the age of the rock in which the fossils are found. Isn't it talking about the age of the rock rather than talking about fossils? So like it's saying fossils provide paleontologists with a convenient way of estimating the age of the rock in which the fossils are found. So what does that have to do with using modern technology for the paleontologist?
Yeah, that is a very reasonable option, and you are correct. The thing is, since fossils overall are related to this, and well, we're talking about fossils in general and how technology is helping them, it is still useful information for seeing how fossils can be helpful to paleontologists in general. But actually, when I was getting this question and I checked the answer manual, options B and C were both considered good options because, like you said, the answer book stated that there could be solid ground for C because the age of rock answer, or at least the age of rock, could be seen as deviating information. So actually, I will say this. You know what? It's kind of against the rules, but I'll say options B and C are both correct, in my opinion. You could honestly swing either way. And if you got C, then you are correct. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Varoob. I nearly forgot about how that important complication in the answer book. But yeah, options B and C are good answers.
All right, thank you.
No problem. And also, you don't have to worry about the options being that close on the actual SAT. It's just that when they created these, they wanted them to be close so that they could, foster deep thought. Okay. Sentence placement. This was, the question that we did in the beginning, actually. So the sentences have to be placed in a logical way. Sentence number 2, it starts with the word but, which means that there should have been a contradiction before. And we said that, at least most of us said that we should put it after sentence 4 because sentence 4 says, in the past, such research was limited by the weight and bulk of the fossils, as well as their preciousness and fragility. So that's the problem. And then sentence 2 would be able to come in there and say, but now we have the solution. So that is why option C is correct, because it just makes the most sense. This is also another intuition thing that could work. You should think about logical flow and overall, just in your head, try and rearrange it. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to do this. Let me see if there's anything. Okay, there's nothing after this. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to do this question, starting now. This question can actually be a little bit tricky sometimes, so make sure you read it a little bit thoroughly. All right, everybody, 2 minutes are up. So let's come back and check out this question. Okay, so sentence 3. In the consideration of his writing, the details of that stressful experience have largely overshadowed the importance of his return to society. Now, the important things you need to know is that in sentences, oftentimes, the sentence will reference things that happen in other sentences. So you might want to put the sentence in places where they will obviously be referring to something in the sentence before it so that there is a natural flow. In this case, there is a reference. So in sentence 3, in the consideration of his writing, the details of that stressful experience. What stressful experience? We don't know what the stressful experience is in just reading sentence 3. That must mean that the stressful experience in question was talked about previously. So which sentence provides an example or has contents of a stressful experience that Dostoevsky experienced. That was a bad pronunciation. Well, sentence one, 19th century Russian novelist Fyodor, I'm not going to pronounce that, spent 9 years as a political prisoner in Siberia. Yeah, that is pretty traumatic and would be a stressful experience, no? So having sentence three after sentence one is actually a pretty good idea. What about sentence four? He also founded a new political journal, a courageous move for a man whose similar earlier actions had led to his imprisonment. So that imprisonment could be a good lead into sentence three. However, it doesn't really go into much detail, right? It just says the imprisonment. Sentence one is the sentence that explains a little bit more about why he was a prisoner. It tells us like how long he spent, and it says that he was a political prisoner. So sentence four, or at least option B, it's all right, but it's a worse version of option A. So unfortunately, you have to say that B is wrong. Now, option D, where is now? Okay. So sentence two is basically what option D is referring to. When he came back to St. Petersburg in late 1859, he plunged into the debates about human nature and society that preoccupied educating Russians in the consideration of his writing. Now, that could be a good lead-in because it talks about how Yodvetsky is talking about debating about human nature, and then it talks about his writing, but there's no stressful experience really being talked in sentence two. So D is not really effective. C, after sentence five, such experiences would help form the basis of his most famous novels. Three, like option D, you could say that talking about novels can be a good lead-in into consideration of his writing, but the details of stressful experience portion of the sentence has nothing to refer to if you put it after sentence five. So C is wrong and A is correct. Samruthi, you have a question?
All right, so I understand why A would be right, but the way I went through this is the very first sentence, it says in consideration of his writing. And so I thought he had to have been talking about something first. So I said after sentence four, which is when he founded a political journal. So why, like, because in my eyes, like A and B are like almost very similar. So why exactly would B be wrong and A right?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the thing is that the writing in this case, or at least the writing portion, is being talked about sort of in an overall way in the paragraph. It's not being talked about very specifically. And meanwhile, the details of that stressful experience, that part, we need to know big information, or at least we need to know the major connection for that, and therefore we need the most details for that. So, I mean, because it's a direct referral, the details of that stressful experience, and meanwhile, in the consideration of his writing, that is not necessitating a strong connection compared to the second part of the sentence. So that is why option A is better than option B. I mean, I understand your view, and I kind of agree with it. Like I said, option B was good, but it was similar to option A, and it was like a worse version of option A.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Haroop, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you already answered this or not, but so the way I picked B because in my mind, the one that you underlined, the details of that stressful experience, sentence 5 has such experiences would help form the basis. So I was thinking that sentence 3 would go after sentence 4 because it would be a great lead-in to sentence 5.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure, and I didn't understand what sentence 3 would lead into for sentence 2, because if you put it between 1 and 2, I'm not sure where the connectivity would be. So I was thinking that between 4 and 5 would be the greatest, because he also found a new political journal that talks about the writing, the details of stressful experience, such experiences. So I was thinking that it would be B.
Yeah, I totally understand that as well. But the thing is that 4 and 5 already kind of works, because 5 is not 5, if you notice, experiences is a plural. So it's talking about multiple experiences. So that means it would be talking about how he founded a new political journal, and it would also be referring to his imprisonment and the earlier actions which are vaguely mentioned there. So 4 and 5, they already have a good relationship together. So I felt that putting the answer between 4 and 5 would sort of disrupt the flow. And like I said before, we need the strongest connection between the details of the stressful experience and the actual reference of said experience. So that's why I said after sentence 1. Sorry, we'll only be able to do 2 questions per slide, so unfortunately we'll have to move on. Okay, transition words. So this is a good one. Let's take a look at number 39. So number 39 is a vocab type question where you need to choose the right word or right phrase to use. This is a transition question because we're trying to transition from idea to idea, sentence to sentence. So we can read the previous sentence in order to get context. In determining how working time and responsibilities would be divided, steps were taken by Levine and Rocco to ensure that the arrangement provided fluidity and consistency for the employees whom they jointly managed. It's our job to be seamless, they noted. So we're talking about 2 employees and how they're trying to be fluid with their co-working schedule. So what is the sentence after the underlined portion of 39? They each plan to work 3 days a week with a day of overlap on Wednesdays. They also planned to talk on the phone each evening to discuss the day's work. So after 39, they're talking about the practices they're going to do to make sure that everything goes smoothly. So option A, nevertheless. Nevertheless is a transition used when we need to discard what was just said before. It's sort of used in a situation where you're saying, okay, so this happened, but forgetting that, nevertheless, this happened instead. That's not really the relationship we want here, because what is happening or what is being stated before is clearly affecting or at least influencing what is happening afterwards. So we need a cause and effect, or not cause and effect, we need a continuation, sort of, where we're going from, okay, this is what's happening, and then we're doing this to do that. So A is wrong because the tone, or at least the use of the word, is wrong. D, similarly, this is a comparative one. We're not comparing anything, so D doesn't make sense. C, however is used when there is a sort of contrast or a conflict. There's no conflict here, so C doesn't make any sense. B is the correct answer because it says to this end. To this end is used in a way where you're saying to reach this goal, we're gonna do this. So B is the best way, or at least the best phrase to be used, because that is exactly what's happening here. They detailed their concerns and how they're going to try to do something, and then they say to this end, and then they specify everything that's happening afterwards. All right, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of practice, and I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to do this starting now. All right, everybody, let's come back. This is going to be the last thing for the day, so let's come back and check it out. So reforestation efforts, while undeniably valuable, often result in forests with limited biodiversity. Okay, we're being introduced with a problem right off the bat. So the next sentence is saying, care should be taken to plant a wide variety of native flora in depleted woodlands. So which transition word is going to be best used here? So however is kind of a weird option to use here. It's going to be wrong because however is used when you're introducing new information sort of contradicts what is being said before. And that is not the relationship in this case. The relationship is sort of, okay, we have a problem, so we need to do this. B, accordingly. Accordingly is a transition word that is used to say, okay, we need to follow this procedure, or, okay, so this problem was stated, accordingly, we need to do this. And that is exactly the relationship that is happening here. So B is actually going to be the correct answer. C and D are going to be wrong. C is wrong because you don't want to disregard what is happening before, because what is being said before is very important for the second part of the sentence. And D, furthermore is a continuation type transition, but we're not continuing anything really. Continuations are used when you're saying, okay, I'm saying this. Furthermore, I'm saying something else that kind of supports what is being said, or I'm just providing additional information. That's not really what is happening here. We have a problem and solution type situation where accordingly is best used. Second question, the Gordie Howe hat trick, an unofficial feat in which a hockey player scores a goal, records an assist, and gets in a fight all in the same game, is named after hockey great Gordie Howe. Despite this fact, Howe only achieved 2 such games in his professional career, which is far fewer than other players. So the relationship is, okay, this is a fact, or this is a piece of information. It's interesting, right? However, it's kind of ironic. So this is a however sort of transition word, or however would actually be a good transition word to use here. So what is something similar we could use instead? That is actually a good tactic here, which is think of the transition word that you would use, and then think of, if the option is present there, then that's probably the right answer. If it's not present there, then think of the transition word or phrase that could be used there, similar to what you were thinking. Despite this fact, it is actually similar to however, so A is a good option. B, as such is a is similar to accordingly, and it's actually also similar to furthermore as well, where it's sort of like continuing what is happening. That's not really what's happening here. So B is going to be wrong. We need a contradiction, right? C, afterwards, this is chronologic based, which is not what's happening here. So C is wrong. D, as a result, that makes absolutely no sense, because how having such games would lead to the hat trick being named after him. So the hat trick shouldn't result in Howe doing it. That doesn't make any sense. A is going to be the correct option. I'll take 2 questions. Tejas, you have a question?
Yes, I did. On the first question,
Yes.
I picked C. I guess like part of my question is like, is reforestation efforts different from planting a wide variety of native flora?
Yes. Reforestation efforts, they explain it in the first sentence. Reforestation efforts result in forests with limited biodiversity, which is saying that reforestation inherently has some flaws. So accordingly, we need to do this to combat said flaws.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
No problem. Rishi, you have a question.
So for the second one,
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused because in the first part before the transition, it says how in order to do a trick, you get a fight in a game, and like you have to like score a goal, get an assist, and fight in the same game. Now I was thinking that because of doing this, you're like more likely to get kicked out, and which is why I said like as a result, how you only played 2 such games as professional career. I picked D because like I just thought like doing this trick would like probably get you like out of the league or something like that. So that's why I picked D.
That is okay. I kind of see where you're coming from. That is a very sort of out there conclusion that you just came to. You're not supposed to do that. You can't just come to conclusions that are not really related. What I'm saying is he came to conclusion, okay, he would probably get kicked out because of that. There's no discussion here whatsoever about being kicked out. So that conclusion shouldn't really be applied here. And also, second sentence, if you read it carefully, it says, Hao only achieved 2 such games like this in his professional career, far fewer than many other players, which implies that many other players did all of these feats many more times than Hao, which implies that they didn't get kicked out of the league even after doing it multiple times. So that actually combats your logic right there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Oh, and we went a little bit over time. Apologies for that. So that will be the end of today's session. And before you leave, just wanted to say, if you'd like to ask me any questions, I am in the WhatsApp group that you guys are in and that all your parents are in. So if you'd like to ask me a question, you can just search me in the WhatsApp group, Hasith Garapati. And if you can't do that, you can have my phone number, which I'll put in the description. Make sure you only message me on WhatsApp because it will get pretty clogged if it goes on my name. And also, if you want my email, sorry, I accidentally sent a direct message. Okay. Let me just send that to everyone. Okay, control copy, control paste. Yep, that is my email. And if you, that is my phone number. And if you want my email, here it is. So yeah, you can contact me if you guys have any questions. And I really don't have anything else more for you. So bye and have a good night. And I'll see you on Friday.